The traditional Somali money transfer agents known as hawalas may be driven out of business in the United States. That's after the last major U.S. bank, Merchants Bank, opted to close all remaining accounts of Somali money transfer companies. An estimated $214 million is wired into Somalia every year. We assess the impact of this drastic move tonight. It is time for Global Business. Hello and welcome to the show. As another trading week comes to a close, we'll be examining all the latest happenings on the business front from within the continent. I am Penina Karibe, live from the Kenyan capital, Nairobi. Plenty coming up this half hour, including these stories. Egypt's central bank cracks the whip on black market forex trading. And violence rocks Sibanye Gold in South Africa as unions battle over membership control. Let's begin in Egypt, where the central bank has announced new limits on forex deposits. Individuals or companies will not be allowed to deposit more than $10,000 per day in the banks, and total monthly deposits should not exceed $50,000. This is part of attempts to crack down on the black market forex trade, which has weakened the Egyptian pound. Yasser Hakim has more.
The central bank calls it the war on the black market. The scarcity of the dollar has given room for the black market to soar in the last 3 years. The margin between the black market and the official rate had exceeded 20%. Officials took action 3 months ago.
They started by putting a ceiling on withdrawing hard currency from banks. They gradually started devaluating the local currency to reduce the gap with the black market and stabilize the interest rates of the pound.
Experts said it was a good approach, but not enough. In the last 2 weeks, the dollar jumped from 7.6 to 7.95 pounds in the unofficial market. The official rate reached 7.55. Egypt needs hard currency to import its basic needs. The drastic drop in the foreign currency reserves after the 2011 uprising contributed to the dollar's rise. Hence, the latest decision to limit any dollar deposits to 10,000 a day with a maximum 50,000 a month. It worked. Demand for the dollar went to the ground. Many exchange offices had to close down for the day, and the black market faced huge losses. Some say, however, it could be temporary.
Simply, the companies and others will open separate accounts with different names to deposit money without limit. It could have hampered the black market, but it will harm the serious companies that need the hard currency for business.
The central bank says it's adamant to continue. There will be more measures announced soon. Experts say time is tight for the central bank. It needs to kill off the black market before the economic summit next March. This is one of the main conditions set by businessmen who will participate in the conference and are willing to invest in Egypt. Yasser Hakim for CCTV, Cairo.
South Africa's Sibanye Gold suspended work at its Beatrix mine after 9 workers were injured when a fight broke out between members of 2 rival unions. The fight between members of the Association of Mine Workers and Construction Union AMCU and the National Union of Mine Workers broke out on Thursday. AMCU officials were meeting the company's management to sign a recognition agreement. NUM has lost tens of thousands of members to AMCU in the Platinum Belt in a brutal tough war that erupted in 2012. NUM is struggling to hold on to its members as AMCU spreads its influence into other mining sectors like gold. Meanwhile, Majakanang village near Moinoi in the northwest province of South Africa entered its 5th day of protest action on Friday. The village, located on the N4 highway that connects Tshwane and the Mozambique border, was the scene of violent protest last year for the same reasons. Residents claim that they still don't have running water or electricity. A portion of the busy N4 highway has been closed and traffic diverted around the hotspot after villagers began stoning cars and trucks. Residents are angry, while academics suggest there are deeper underlying issues.
Looks like service delivery protests, and for some municipalities, of course, service delivery is awful, but what it really is an overall frustration, and the unemployment is way too high, especially for young people, and it's mostly young people that are protesting.
Now they started to come each and everywhere, and the neighboring villages to loot shops, and they are looting every thing, and I believe that it's no longer a strike. This strike is a criminal element.
South Africa is leading the G77 for the second time in 10 years. The Group of 77 is the largest intergovernmental grouping in the world. It focuses on common socio-economic challenges affecting developing nations. This year, the G77 will focus on sustainable development goals, an evolution from the United Nations Millennium Development Goals, as Sumitra Naidu reports.
The G77 was started by 77 countries in 1964 to tackle poverty and underdevelopment. Its membership has grown to 134 nations. But many of the problems that plagued the world 51 years ago still exist. South Africa will lead the way this year in finding solutions to tackle high levels of inequality and poverty.
South Africa has had the fortune of being elected into the chair of the G77 at a very crucial time in the international environment generally, but also in the evolution of the G77, especially because of what is happening to the global economy. It is recovering, and in this recovery, the emerging countries, the developing countries, are doing a lot better than more developed countries.
South Africa will focus on mapping out a plan to build on the Millennium Development Goals. The MDGs were set in 2000 and is aimed at improving access to education, tackling inequality and improving basic services. While there has been some progress in Asia and South America, very little has changed in Africa.
The fundamental challenges of Africa may be deeper than the 8 goals. It hasn't really transitioned from where it was before independence to where it should be. So it's much more fundamental. So it's almost a need for recreation of the states, recreation of countries again, doing the basics first, because the goals are premised on an assumption that the basics exist, but not in most parts of the African continent.
When South Africa first chaired the G77 in 2006, Africa was on the cusp of an economic boom. The continent still has some of the fastest growing economies in the world, but most of its people still continue to live in abject poverty.
It's a huge dilemma for the African continent. You get told all the time that Africa's growth rates look positive, but it's just growth in numbers, growth in GDP numbers. And it is not growth that is visible in the lives of the people. And part of the reason why it is so is because we do not understand how growth translates to development.
Out of the 54 countries in Africa, only 22 reported progress on some of the Millennium Development Goals. Those noted include countries like South Africa, Mauritius, Ghana, Seychelles, and even Rwanda. But wars, political strife and disease continue to hamper progress in countries like South Sudan, Somalia and Ethiopia. Meanwhile, China, whom South Africa enjoys a sound political and economic relationship with, plays a major role at the G77. While it is not a member, China has been a special invitee since 1981. It is heavily involved in policy and decision-making and representing the developing world at the United Nations. Sumitra Naidu, CCTV, Johannesburg.
A look at the markets now, when the JSE All Share Index ended the week in the green, gaining 0.38%. Still ahead on global business, Tunisia's new government pledges an economic revival and jobs for the youth, but not all are convinced. And why ongoing currency fluctuations across the continent may spell doom to Africa's debt levels.
Africa is on the move. It's home to 7 of the world's 10 fastest growing economies. We help you make sense of the fast-changing African business landscape. We take you where the business is happening.
Global Business, weekdays at this time on CCTV Africa.
This is the first year that Africa will have more foreign direct investment than aid. And it's like the tipping point in terms of changing the way the continent is perceived. And I think this summit very much responds to that call Now, whether it can materialize what is being announced is something that we'll have to check and see whether it happens.
You're watching Global Business. Welcome back. Tunisia's first full-term government since the 2011 unrest is promising to create jobs and revive the struggling economy. But many young people say they're not hopeful about the future and they don't believe any government will be able to change things for the better.
Tunisia's parliament on Thursday overwhelmingly approved the country's first full-term post-revolutionary government. The young men meeting in this cafe in El Mourouj, a suburb of the capital Tunis, are not optimistic about where their country is heading. A string of interim governments since the country's revolution in 2011 have not succeeded in bringing jobs and economic growth. The new Prime Minister Habib Essid says his government will take urgent measures in the first 100 days to get the economy back on track. He wants to create jobs with infrastructure projects and carry out reforms to attract investment.
The poor have been crushed. As you see, everything is expensive. A salad costs 5 dinars, about 2 euros, and the daily wage of a man is 10 dinars. So what should he do? Should he eat salad all week?
Faisal Abdi holds a master's degree but can't find work. He says that he will speak well of the government if it creates a job for him, but he isn't optimistic.
The situation is the same. Nothing will ever change. We're unemployed and that's it. If this government is able to give us work, then great. But then, more likely than not, 10 governments after that will be equally useless. Nothing will change the country's situation. There's not even a hint of things changing for the good.
We're waiting for the government to see what it will do for us. And we have no hope in any government because the country is already rotten. The government must be cleaned up. Each person in power thinks only about himself. Filling his pockets, he thinks about his family and those near him. And meanwhile, the rest of the country can't find anything to eat.
In the 4 years since Tunisians overthrew longtime President El Abidine Ben Ali, the country's economy has struggled. There have also been attacks from radical militants that have killed 2 politicians and left many members of the security forces dead.
Everything has become expensive. The only thing that has stayed cheap is the value of each person in our country. In this country, everything is expensive, except the Tunisian himself. He is cheap.
Shijumi and others like him are not yet convinced that life will get better. Jin Keo, CCTV.
Agriculture production in Zimbabwe has received a major boost following a donation of equipment by the European Union to boost food security initiatives in the country. The donation, including technical support, will enhance monitoring, evaluation and output of Zimbabwe's agricultural sector.
Agricultural production in Zimbabwe has been on the decline due to a variety of technical challenges that have been further exacerbated by unpredictable weather patterns. This, however, is expected to improve thanks to a donation of vehicles and other agricultural equipment from the European Union. The donation will help small-scale farmers with planning, implementation, monitoring and evaluation of projects.
This is, of course, part of a long-standing commitment of the EU and the FAO, of course, in support of the agricultural sector in the country. And as we have had the chance of saying today, is that we made renewed commitments to continue to support the agricultural sector in this country and even to step up our commitments to the agricultural sector over the next years.
The equipment is valued at $600,000 and will enable personnel to reach out to targeted communities.
It's a good thing for us as a project, as first forces, because all along we've been having challenges in terms of having people, accessing, certain areas of the project areas. And now that we have the vehicles, it's really going to improve our mobility and our reach to the intended beneficiaries of the project.
Zimbabwe's agriculture sector is the backbone of the economy. Not only is it key to economic growth and creation of employment, but also ensures food production and poverty eradication. The FAO supports community irrigation schemes, development of more productive smallholder livestock sector, as well as sustainable forest management. Valdi Carolsa, CCTV.
California-based Merchants Bank, which handles money transfers between US-based Somalis and their families in East Africa, will close its accounts this Friday over concerns the funds are being channeled to militants. The bank handles up to 80% of such transfers from the US, worth about $200 million annually. It was one of the last US banks serving as a medium for such large-scale transactions. The Office of the Comptroller of the Currency, a federal regulator, told the Merchants Bank of California last year that it found its anti-money laundering procedures inadequate. British bank Barclays also stopped remittances to Somalia in late 2013. The tumbling value of local currencies is threatening a debt crisis in sub-Saharan Africa, a think tank has warned, with Nigeria, Ghana and others facing a combined extra bill of around $11 billion. Robert Soy has more on what's hot tonight.
Africa is not familiar with the phrase debt crisis, but it might soon be facing it head-on.
The risk of default on government debt in sub-Saharan Africa is growing. Many countries are borrowing simply too much relative to the size of their economies. But secondly, governments are also borrowing in US dollars. In the last year, many African currencies have depreciated very sharply against the dollar, and that means the value of that debt in local currencies has grown.
Judith Tyson's report for leading think tank, the Overseas Development Institute, says African nations face extra currency costs for their debt of nearly $11 billion. That's around 1.1% of the sub-Saharan region's GDP. Nigeria is top on the list. Its currency, the naira, made double-digit losses against the dollar last year because of falling crude prices. And despite multiple central bank interventions, it's still tumbling to new lows.
Oil prices and copper prices have collapsed. That's been very challenging for countries where that is their main exports. And secondly, the slowdown in China is affecting the whole continent. It's one of their main export markets.
Ghana's cedi dropped over 30% against the dollar last year. The West African nation hopes to secure a bailout program from the International Monetary Fund to help fix its ailing economy.
Mozambique borrowed $850 million through the international bond markets. Their stated purpose for those funds was about their fishing industry. Obviously, in terms of economic growth, that's a very positive story. But in fact, it was widely rumoured that they spent it on military gunboats.
A debt crisis isn't inevitable, says the Overseas Development Institute. But if it happens, just think. It warns of homes lost in the US, Asian food shortages, and the Eurozone's massive unemployment problem to see the damage done by previous crises. Robert Soy, CCTV.
Let's take a look now at some commodity prices. Brent crude oil was on track for the biggest weekly rise since 2011 as fighting in Libya and stronger economic signals from the US helped futures rebound from near 6-year lows. Prices have rallied nearly 20% over the past 6 sessions, but they remained roughly 50% below their peak from the middle of last year. No sustained recovery is expected in the near term amid rising global inventories and steady OPEC supply. Coming up, feeding Ghana's middle-class appetites despite the frustrating power blackouts.
Having lived in 4 different African countries and with a diverse background, I cherish the personal as well as professional experiences I've had across the continent. It's this understanding of the place I call home that drives me to tell stories about its people, its needs, present and future.
There's just so much happening in Africa in terms of the way forward and development. It only brings positivity.
My place at CCTV Africa is about creating awareness around the realities of a continent that is indeed complex, vibrant, and has great potential.
Africa is my home.
how it prospers, the challenges it faces, its people all matter to me because this is my future. I'm Famida Miller and I'm a reporter and anchor at CCTV Africa.
Global brewer Heineken opened the largest brewery in Ethiopia. Based on the outskirts of Addis Ababa, this is Heineken's third plant in the East African country and will have an annual capacity of 1.5 million hectolitres. The facility will also produce local brands and is meant to bolster the brewer's footprint in the Ethiopian capital.
Giant Dutch brewing company Heineken opened its first brewery in Ethiopia. The 120 million euro brewery has the capacity to produce 1.5 million hectolitres of beer. A hectolitre is a metric unit used to establish wine, beer and grain and is equivalent to 100 litres. Heineken hopes the project will enable it to expand further into the Ethiopian market and aims to target raw materials from Africa.
We have a stated policy that by 2020, 60% of all raw materials Heineken uses in Africa will be sourced out of Africa. And we use quite a lot of barley, malted barley, in our West African and Central African operations. This barley, most of it comes out of Europe, certainly not out of Africa.
Walia beer is Heineken's biggest brand on the market, named after Ethiopia's national football team, the Walia Antelopes.
Walia is a fantastic success. It is going very, very well and we are very, very happy with it. But what is more important for us is that the consumers are very happy with the brand and that, yeah, they like the quality, they like the taste, and they feel it's a very attractive brand, and we can see that every day in our sales and in the pressure that it puts on our production and on our distribution. So we are very happy with that.
Ethiopia consumes an average 5 litres of beer per capita annually. Mahe Mutua, CCTV.
Ghana's middle class is expanding despite economic problems that have led the government to seek help from the International Monetary Fund. Local entrepreneurs are seizing the opportunity to feed the appetite of the expanding middle class. In the hospitality sector, running a restaurant is high stress anywhere, but owners say it is tougher in Ghana due to irregular power supply, but they're betting on the country's growing appetite for good food.
As the owner of one of Ghana's busiest restaurants, Afua Asante has a lot on her plate, from managing a team of 40 to ensuring each dish is cooked just right. She's one of a new breed of restaurant owners in Ghana's capital, Accra, serving a middle class that's expanding despite economic problems that led the government to seek help from the International Monetary Fund. The economy is worth more than $37 billion, too small for the likes of McDonald's, but leaving a niche for African restaurateurs such as Asante, who grew up in a village in eastern Ghana. She opened Asmira restaurant in Accra 6 years ago, offering a $20 buffet menu featuring staples such as fufu, made from pounded cassava and plankton. Most of the restaurants target business travelers, expatriates and tourists, but the sweet spot is Africa's middle class.
Anybody at all can just walk into Asmira, because our prices is affordable. But for instance, the presidents, the ambassadors, the top class people, this is where they eat.
A main dish in an ordinary restaurant is just made up of certain specific items. But over here, there's a variety from which you could choose. So virtually, you can make your own main dish the way you want it and enjoy it.
Sub-Saharan Africa spends more on food as a percentage of its income than any other region in the world, yet its restaurant sector, South Africa aside, is smaller than anywhere else, industry experts say. But Africa's middle class is expanding, with 128 million households expected to be on an annual income of $5,000 or more in 2020, up from just 85 million in 2008, according to a report by global management consulting firm McKinsey. As economic growth increases household incomes, eating out should take off over the next decade, and African entrepreneurs are seizing the opportunity. Eric Ando, who lived in Britain for years, returned to Ghana a few years ago. He opened Starbites restaurant, offering a menu of things he liked to eat: sandwiches, burgers, pizza, and African food. The business boomed, and he now has 3 outlets in Accra, with plans to open more in the capital's metropolitan area.
I think Ghana has the potential to do it. We're doing it. We're almost 4 years into it, and we have 3 branches. You know, if we push, by the end of this year, we can have 6 branches. You know, we've got a formula now, so we can replicate what we have far easier and faster in other areas.
Running a restaurant is high stress anywhere, but owners say it's tougher in Ghana due to irregular power supply, corruption at the port that raises the cost of imports, and staff who fail to grasp the ethics of good service. But restaurateurs are staking their fortunes on Africa's growing appetite. Valdi Karolse, CCTV.
And a quick check on the currency. South Africa's rand tumbled 2% on Friday, giving up gains that saw the currency raise to a 2-month high to the dollar after strong jobs growth in the US put a mid-year rate hike there back in the reckoning. Analysts say the local currency could recover in the short term on technical factors, although the US Federal Reserve's policy outlook remained a strong downside risk. Well, that's it for this edition of Global Business. Do send your feedback to Global Business Africa at cctv.com. You can visit our Facebook page, CCTV Africa, and you can also stay in touch with Global Business on Twitter using the handle at CCTV News Africa. I'm Penina Karibe. Thank you for watching.